Okay, time to finish that Andor video. Oh, hey Adam, what are you doing here?
Want to see a magic trick?
Not really.
Good. Abracadabra!
Ben Solo was a mistake. His redemption, to be specific, not his conception or birth. Though if we're talking to the Jakku villagers, Poe, Hux when Kylo was being a bratty bottom, TFA Rey, RIP, we never got to see her again, Finn or TFA Rey again, I'm sure many of them would have rather had Han do his duty and let Leia be the man that night, if you know what I'm saying. Kylo Ren, born Ben Solo to Han Solo and Leia Organa, was a fallen Jedi who rejected his Jedi heritage out of a sense of ambition and dreams of grandeur, betraying Luke Skywalker, pulling a pumped-up Jedi kicks on his temple, going off with his emo band of losers and becoming a high-ranking member of the First Order, with the Ginger Power-Top General, Artemis Hux, and Captain Brienne of Tarth, all of them serving under Supreme Leader Snoke. Wait, is that Caesar? This was the backstory initially set up in The Force Awakens, along with the narrative foil dynamic with Renegade Stormtrooper Finn, and to a lesser extent, Mysterious Scavenger Rey. I'm not saying Rey was the lesser character, by the way, before you go into the comments. I'm saying there was a greater foil dynamic between Finn and Kylo than there was Rey and Kylo. The Force Awakens wasn't perfect, but one thing it did do was introduce their interesting lead characters and present their story in a way that was both easy to understand and develop unless you lacked any creativity like most of the Star Wars community did in 2017 or didn't care about story setup whatsoever. Why is Rian Johnson on my screen? Rey was introduced as a mysterious scavenger, revealed to have a deep connection to the Skywalkers to the point its family lightsaber called to her initially and later physically, heavily implying that Rey's missing family and the mysterious connection to said Skywalkers will lead to the same answers.
We wanted it to be a more personal story, something that she couldn't comprehend, that was overwhelming to her, frightening to her, that was taking her through all these elemental experiences of fire, of rain, snow, wind, but also that she was being confronted with truths about the Force, about the past, the Knights of Ren here, the past for herself. She realizes the cries she heard were actually her own cries as a young girl being taken away from her family.
Whomever you're waiting for on Jakku, they're never coming back, but there's someone who still could. Look.
You imagine an ocean. I see it. I see the island.
Rey arrives at a clearing, small, modest, primitive stone structures, but no one is around. Rey walks past them, sees, senses no one, and then she stops, feels something. She turns. Standing 40 feet away from her, his back to us, is a man in a cloak and a robe. Rey stares, knowing exactly who it is. But she just stares for what seems like forever until he finally turns slowly to her, pulls back his hood. It is Luke Skywalker. Older now, white hair, bearded. He looks at Rey, a kindness in his eyes. But there's something tortured too. He doesn't need to ask her who she is or what she is doing here. His look says it all. In response, Rey pulls something from her pack, Luke's lightsaber, and she holds it out to him, an offer, a plea, the galaxy's only hope. Hold on Luke Skywalker's incredible face, amazed, conflicted at what he sees. As our music builds, the promise and adventure just beginning. The end.
Well, fuck that.
To put it bluntly, it hinted that she was Luke's daughter, which makes sense given the fact that Rey is just a workshopped version of Kira. Literally, that was her initial name, who was the daughter of Luke in the early drafts of Episode 7. There was a heavy implication that this story was still where things were going to go with Rey in The Force Awakens. There was also a darkness inside of her, hinted at early in the film by her temptation to sell BB-8, her natural distrust from her upbringing, fear of the Force and the unknown, and finally the anger she felt over people that hurt the ones close to her that brought her to almost killing Kylo Ren. While Rey had many similarities to Luke, there was that darkness that resembled another character, another Skywalker. Finn was introduced as a renegade stormtrooper, shown to have a profound moral confliction about hurting civilians and not wanting to be a slave of the First Order. This led Finn to go rogue, save the pilot, that led him to save BB-8, thus leading him to Rey, thus leading him to the Falcon, Han Solo, the Skywalker lightsaber, saving Rey, and eventually facing down Kylo Ren, completing his hero's journey from stormtrooper to hero. It goes without saying that The Force Awakens set up Finn to be the male lead of the trilogy, arguably the love interest of Rey, and potentially the next Jedi after her. Many don't realize this, but Finn and Rey were not just that interracial couple that certain people couldn't vibe with in the community and apparently at Lucasfilm. It was the actual dynamic that held Force Awakens together despite its flaws. Rey was the obvious Skywalker setup, the legacy character that was familiar to what we've seen before, yet slightly different in the ways that would be explored later. Finn was a literal nobody, a random without a first or last name, homeworld, possible or hinted relationship to any legacy character whatsoever. He was also everything narratively and even physically about this character was different from the protagonist we have had before in the Star Wars movies. In that sense, to continue the story of The Force Awakens, no matter how it would evolve and its characters change, there was a core dynamic that you needed to keep, and if that dynamic were to change, it would have to be built off of what was already there, not something that didn't exist. Let's give an example. Say the dynamic changed because Rey's journey and growth in the Force made her become darker. In this new era, the Sith were gone, and if the Jedi couldn't offer her the power she needed to protect the one she loved, and whatever Snoke and the Knights of Ren were had been a threat to the people she loved, the third option could have been becoming a Sith, using that to fight her enemies. This could have led Finn, who had already been tested and rejected the dark side, being the one who eventually bring her back, thus helping her avoid the fate Anakin Skywalker once took, beginning the trilogy with a redemption story and ending the trilogy with another redemption story, without having Finn in episode 7 or Rey in episode 9 committing too many atrocities that redemption would be taken off the table. We would also be able to see this fall from grace from the very beginning, from Rey being a troubled scavenger to a conflicted Jedi and finally a dark warrior. We'd have an understanding of how she got to where she was and how to bring her back. We would also have a romantic relationship between Finn and Rey, and there would be an actual romantic relationship between Finn and Rey that had a tangible setup, development, and ending instead of just forcing random romances into the story for the sake of romances, like Duel of the Fates did with Poe and Rey and The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker with Kylo and Rey. But that's not what happened, mind you. What happened wasn't really anything other than a game of musical chairs, and that's because the third lead of The Force Awakens, or rather, what happened to the third lead of The Force Awakens, a lack of commitment and changing plans that hurt the entire trilogy beyond repair.
Did you know that at least you're playing Vader 2.0? Like, at least did you know that as conceptually?
I did, yeah. And I had an overall arc that in mind that he wanted to do, which, you know, then changed. But his idea was that almost the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts the most confident, the most, committed to the dark side. And by, the last movie, he's the most vulnerable and weak. And he wanted to start at the opposite, where this character was the most confused and vulnerable. And by the end of the three movies would be most committed to the dark side. So I tried to keep that arc in mind, regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyway, because it changed, obviously, as we were shooting.
Yeah, right.
Right, but I was still kind of focused on that.
When did it change?
Well, with Ryan, he took it into a different direction, but still it kind of still tracked with the character. Then the last one, it changed into being, about them and the dyad and things like that. And
then again, so you
and kind of evolving into Ben Solo. That was never part of it.
That wasn't either?
No.
Kylo Ren was introduced as a fallen Jedi and the master of Ren. Don't ask what a Ren is, none of the films tell us.
No. Wait.
Tell me why ain't nothing but a
While initially thought to be the literal Vader 2.0, we learn that he is not Vader and fails to be Vader, yet wants to be the character, but not the literal Darth Vader, but the idea of him that believed that Luke Skywalker destroyed what Vader had built when he redeemed Vader in Return of the Jedi. This is what initially motivated Kylo, an idea many people watching The Force Awakens at the time thought Kylo not being able to live up to Vader meant he would be redeemed in the film itself instead of his redemption being dragged out until the last movie. What many people didn't realize is that J.J. Abrams was already showing us the difference between Vader and Kylo Ren, and not in the ways many people thought, at least many people who weren't paying enough attention. Despite what the prequel trilogy showed us with Anakin's backstory becoming Vader, in the original trilogy itself, we never saw Vader do that many atrocities.
You serious?
You are my dad. You're my dad. Wookie, wookie, wookie.
He was an accomplice and the leader of many of them, yet for the sake of audience psychology or just luck, except for cutting off Luke's hand, we never saw much of Vader putting in work. Don't get me wrong, Vader had a presence. He definitely was the antagonist and a terrifying one at that, but most of the worst things he does is either off-screen, implied, or done to his other subordinates when they fucked up. Whereas with Kylo, we saw him order and watch the execution of an entire civilian village, something we never saw Vader do in the original trilogy. We saw Kylo brutally and explicitly torture Poe and then later Rey on screen, something we never saw Vader do on screen. It was almost like the audience was being prepped to see Kylo do something that Vader would never have done, no matter the circumstances. And then we watched Kylo reject redemption and murder his own family in cold blood, something we never saw Vader do in the original trilogy, after literally being put in the same position as Vader was in Return of the Jedi, only without the pressure of an evil, cackling sugar daddy in a pimp robe, literally kicking his feet and giggling like a schoolgirl behind him. Kylo rejected any form of redemption and killed his father. Kylo just didn't reject his father's redemption and crumble. He killed Han Solo, tried to ignore Harrison Ford's unhinged cackling of finally being free, went after the heroes of the story, and then fucked both their backs up so bad you thought he was Tobey Maguire. Kylo had taken his first steps to being the exact opposite of Vader, someone who wasn't trapped in the darkness, but willingly walked into it. So, excuse my French and ignore the fact that I probably said fuck at least 2 times before in this video. What the fuck happened in the later 2 movies? You have The Last Jedi, that just repeated Kylo's arc of rejecting redemption, only this time coming at the cost of completely destroying Rey as a character, in order for her to behave in ways she never would, given the context of The Force Awakens, and sidelighting Finn into a subplot, thus breaking the flow of the entire trilogy for no other reason than Kylo's arc can't happen if 1. Rey acts like she would act given the context of The Force Awakens. 2. Finn is allowed to be in the main narrative as the male lead, like The Force Awakens set up. 3. Kylo Ren is now repeating his arc from The Force Awakens, but evolving further and continuing his training. There is a large misconception that just because Kylo killed Snoke and became Supreme Leader, that his conflict was over, that he rejected the light, but for some fucking reason, The Last Jedi goes out of its way to say the opposite, where The Force Awakens made it clear every choice Kylo did was his own. The Last Jedi constantly hammers home how Kylo should be seen as the actual victim, how no matter what Mr. Black Parade does, there is some external force that should be blamed, indirectly or directly, for his actions, and that he is still able to come back no matter what. As the film says, no one's ever really gone. Who knew that line would be like a curse to society? Which would lay the groundwork for this. I don't need to give you a long breakdown on why this sweater-wearing symbol of empty fan service and pandering doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to anyway. And sadly, this was something forced upon more than just J.J. Abrams and Adam Driver. The cancelled version of Episode 9 Duel of the Fates, the version that they were going to make, not the early draft that was rejected in 2017 that everyone and their mother ignores when they say they wish it happened, had Kylo Ren at the 11th hour pull a heel-face turn into Ben Solo, as well by having a Knight of Ren, his second in command, I think her name was Saloni Ren, turn into the big bad of the film that him and Rey would have to fight, and she would also kill Kylo Ren. This was dropped because cocaine may be good at parties, but eventually, even the most cracked out executive learns turning the big bad of your film into a random character from a random faction that had not been built up at all in the trilogy is probably a bad idea. So while it did look like Despite the car crash that was The Last Jedi, we were going back to the original plan of Kylo being reverse Vader, we still ended up with Ben Solo. And again I ask, how did this happen? To be blunt, it happened for a number of reasons. One reason was the overwhelming maddening demand from a vocal minority who had a false perception of Kylo Ren that he should be the hero of the story. Not just that, the Skywalker hero of the story. Which was very ironic because one of the reasons why people said Rey shouldn't be the Skywalker hero, as in the daughter of Luke Skywalker, granddaughter of Anakin Skywalker, is because this trilogy did not need the Skywalkers anymore. Which is funny that when people turned around and said Kylo Ren should be the hero of the story because he was a Skywalker, people couldn't get their argument straight. Finn was always a point of contention among both the fandom and Disney Lucasfilm. Initially the character was supposed to be white, but after an overwhelmingly great audition and a chemistry test with Daisy Ridley, John Boyega scored the part and J.J. Abrams fought to keep him. This is what initially resulted in the Force Awakens boycott, and then later Disney Lucasfilm retroactively phasing him into the background for the next two films. The Last Jedi set a status quo for Finn that was hard to change in the eyes of many. He had gone from the male lead to a supporting character. The argument that Finn should have died, a terrible awful one, was also popping up everywhere after the film baited his death in the most nonsensical way, only to have Rose step in the last moment in an equally nonsensical way and then lecture him. Finn was no longer seen as a lead in the film equal to Rey, he was now a supporting character trapped within subplots and subplots. Rey, even though clearly being set up to at worst be the heir of the Skywalker legacy by an act of destiny, and at best the literal granddaughter of Anakin Skywalker and the daughter of Luke Skywalker, was also controversial. The demand from people to have Rey and Kylo be romantically involved was loud and obnoxiously everywhere. Lucasfilm could not make up their mind on what they wanted to do with her origins, and The Last Jedi sacrificing Rey's agency, as spoken above, for Kylo made her lesser in the eyes of many. And no, diehard Daisy Ridley fans who are rushing to the comments to say I'm backing on Rey, I'm defending my lady, by pointing out that much of our arc in The Last Jedi does not revolve around her. It is initially used as a window into Luke Skywalker's character assassination I'm sorry, Luke Skywalker's arc, then she's used as a prop to make sure Kylo's arc can happen, because without her, there is no emotional resonance in that arc. Note, if Kylo Ren's own father, who raised him since he was a baby, and the uncle who saw him like a son, could not stop him from going to the dark side or bring him back from the dark side, a random woman out of nowhere who they both tried to murder each other the day before is not going to do it. Now, you could have maybe tried if there was some familial connection between Rey and Kylo, but even that is hard given unlike Luke, who had old Ben hyping up Anakin, Rey had no memory of her family, and Kylo would have been the one at that point to kill parts of her family, so even if she did have memories, she would remember how Kylo took parts of her family away, and wouldn't even want to redeem him at that point. That's not to say there couldn't have been a family dynamic that grew from there, it's just that it would have needed much more work, something The Last Jedi didn't do and didn't want to do. The other explanation was that Kylo rejecting the dark meant more with Rey because he had feelings for her. Ignoring the fact that he loved his father but still killed him anyway, this fails on every level possible, because the relationship between Rey and Kylo in The Last Jedi is not earned in the slightest. It just goes from them trying to kill each other to Rey automatically thinking he's the galaxy's last hope. Yet even then, the film plays it that Kylo couldn't be redeemed because Rey couldn't reach him, but he still could be redeemed in the end by someone else.
I came to face him, Leia. And I can't save him.
I held out hope for so long, but I know my son's gone.
No one's ever really gone.
Dad.
I know.
When Adam said The Last Jedi changed the direction of his character, this is what he meant. It laid the seeds for the mess that was to follow. Finn was sidelined and wasted. Rey was used and made hollow, all for the sake of this twisted version of character that didn't work with The Force Awakens or even how Adam Driver was playing the character. It just undermined both. The killing of Han Solo was the point of no return. That's not a theory. That's not a headcanon. That is a literal fact from the bloke who played the character and was told the plan of what Kylo Ren would be since day one of the trilogy. And I know this may be hard to hear, but I don't think the very Jewish director who based the First Order off Nazis explicitly would have wanted the protagonist of the new trilogy to end up with the space Nazi romantically to breed his kids, while he became the hero of the trilogy. I'm just not sure that's what J.J. Abrams or Lawrence Kasdan wanted to do when they first made The Force Awakens. Now, actual Kylo fans, I'm not saying you can't fuck Kylo. You can fuck Kylo all you want. Go find a Kylo Ren cosplay and go riz him up. Make sure it's consensual. Don't please leave the Disney employees alone. And remember, Adam Driver is married with a beautiful wife and kid, and apparently a dog that he's very happy with. So yeah, just that. Anyway, despite all that, this change of plan that Ryan initiated had gained a life of its own. It gained a form. It became a movement. Save Ben Solo, as the internet called it. The problem was, well, number one, there was nothing for Kylo Ren to be redeemed for, as Adam Driver put it. He didn't view Kylo Ren as redeemable.
Have you heard the fan rumblings about Ben-demption? That Kylo Ren is going to be redeemed back to his Ben Solo-like heart.
What does he need to be redeemed for? I feel like he feels like he's in the right, so what is there to be redeemed from?
And two, there was no one to save Ben Solo from. The funny thing about The Last Jedi is that it doesn't work in any form without hurting everything that came before and everything that would come after. In Ryan's own words, he wanted to burn the boat, make an ending, not a middle chapter. There is no one to save Kylo Ren because Snoke is dead and Hux is his bitch now. Yet, to not redeem Kylo goes against The Last Jedi's overbearing insistence that there is good in him, he's the victim, and he could be saved. Yet there is nothing stopping Kylo Ren from just ending the war. No one above him can challenge him or stop him from just reaching out to his mother and ending the conflict immediately. Rey literally tells him to do just that when he became leader of the First Order, and he told her to fuck off. Well, he actually told her, help me commit genocide, and she said, what the fuck? But there is really no tension with Kylo as the big bad either. Rey had beaten his ass already in her first film. If Kylo had finished his training and defeated Rey in the second movie, then we'd have something to talk about. But no, he lost again to her, was shown weaker than her and humiliated by Luke, shown to be an inefficient leader, incompetent, and pathetic. Episode 9 would have to build Kylo Ren up as a villain, reaffirming his rejection of redemption once and for all to finally nip that narrative in the bud and have both the heroes and the audience view him as a threat. This would also take time. This would have to be a long movie that not only rebuilt our heroes, brought back Finn into the main narrative, but also allowed Kylo Ren to go on a journey of power to become a threat. And while parts of this idea was brought into the first draft of Duel of the Fates, and even the first draft of The Rise of Skywalker, which brought back Coruscant, even though the later drafts of Duel of the Fates would cut it out. Also, the first draft of The Rise of Skywalker gave Finn a lightsaber, and that automatically makes it better. Sadly, this is not how things went. Somehow, Palpatine returned. Palpatine's return, however, was only to redeem Kylo Ren, to make sure there was someone there for Rey and Kylo to band against. Also for Rey to have an enemy to beat that could actually challenge her, because Kylo, as he was, just couldn't. I've seen many arguments through the years of how Kylo Ren could have been redeemed. I've made a few arguments myself on a better written scenario, but all of them suffer from the same problem within the context of The Force Awakens. That is just not what the film set up. That wasn't how Adam Driver ever tried to play the character, even after the plans were changed until the 11th hour. And finally, the way it was done came at the cost of Rey's agency, Finn's relevance, and finally, Kylo's own character and his initial consistency. Ben Solo was a mistake, because Ben Solo was never supposed to happen, and forcing that into the story, for whatever reason, ruined not only the story The Force Awakens set up, ruined a really interesting character that could have had lots of potential. But sadly, that's nothing new in the conversation of the sequel trilogy. Thank you for those who made it to the end of this video. Thank you for the views, and thank you for still being here. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the wonderful people who help make my channel what it is. Molly, Lola, M, Rhea, and the Kloei Boy, and all of you wonderful people helping me make videos for this channel. I'm eternally thankful for you guys. Social media links are down below, as are the Patreon and YouTube membership links if you'd like to support the channel financially, or just, spread it around. Like always, I hope you're doing well, and no matter what time you're watching this, good morning, good evening, and good night. I'll see you for the next video.